not just telling you about your civil duty. We're talking to you about your rights. Because if the wrong lawmakers get in, the wrong laws get in.
Come on.
So we went through 276 years of chattel slavery as blacks. By law. There's a law. If you runaway slave, you could be not only killed, those that helped you would be captured. It was against the law for blacks to read and write. When I went to school, my mother went to segregated schools. We had the worst schools, underfunded. She would make me do homework she didn't understand. I ain't talking about back in the day, I'm talking about me. My mother never, she wasn't ignorant, she was by law uneducated. So she couldn't help me with geometry because she couldn't study it because it was against the law in Alabama where she grew up for her to study in white school. It was against the law during slavery for whites to teach blacks how to read and write. First thing they did, they cannot enslave you even to this day if you're intelligent, if you're smart. That's why you that are going here to this college, you are breaking a chain of legal history in this country because we were not supposed to be smart enough to be able to deal with ideas and concepts. So we're just 2 or 3 generations out of legal segregation.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, just imagine that you go to get on a bus. Bus fare is $1. You spend the same dollar, but you got to sit in the back. You get hungry, you downtown. You're not by law allowed to eat in restaurants. You want to travel. By law, you can't stay in certain hotels. By law. By law, you got to walk in the gutter while others walked on the curb. By law. This is not something back in the day. This is our parents and your grandparents. So if you understand all of that, then how does somebody convince you you got nothing to vote for? By law, women had to have babies and cook, white and black. White women didn't get the right to vote when white men did. So how do you, in the day that they tell you you can't decide what to do with your body, how you sitting up talking about you ain't got nothing to vote for? So when the movement started around ending slavery, it was whites and blacks, William Lloyd Garrison and Franklin Douglass, that were fighting to end slavery. And as they continued to fight, there was military resistance that had the law on their side. When Lincoln became president and they decided they were going to divide the Union of the United States, and they were going to break off to some Confederate states and make Stonewall Jackson the president, they were fighting over who would control the law of the United States. And for them to break down the law of slavery is what split this country. Lincoln fought and he was getting beat. The Union Army was backed up. Douglass and others went to the White House and begged the president to free the slaves and let them join the Union Army. He refused to do it. When they got further enough north to where it was a threat and it looked like they were going to lose, Lincoln reluctantly let the slaves join the Union Army. And it was those slaves that helped back up the Confederates. That's why some folks be talking about Lincoln freed the slaves. The slaves freed Lincoln. And when they won the Civil War, it was on the promise that January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation said the slaves would be free. That's why if you ever notice, and there are blacks and whites here, blacks celebrate New Year's a little different than whites. You go to white church, they sing nice little hymn and go. And we hollering and jumping and stomping. Because watch night for us was to see if Lincoln's promise was going to hold. There's something else now, Reverend King. But the first watch night for us was whether Lincoln's promise was going to keep. They killed Lincoln, shot him before it did. He was succeeded by Andrew Johnson, who had a Confederate tendency, even though he was in the same party. And it started there to where they came back, went through Reconstruction. Jesse Jr. knows it's been anybody in the country. In 12 years, they ended it by what? They had the Klan, they had the White Citizens Council, the white terrorists. But the threat to our freedom was not the white robe, it was the black robe. They stacked the Supreme Court. By 1896, they voted in Plessy versus Ferguson that blacks had no rights anyone was bound to respect, by law. And from 1896 to 1954, the Supreme Court never ruled different. It was 1954 with a Republican Chief Justice named Earl Warren that gave the first decision that separate was not equal, Brown versus Board of Ed. 54 was that decision. 55, Rosa Parks would not give up a seat in the front of the bus in Montgomery, who had been an activist in the NAACP. Rosa Parks was not told, get off the bus, you acting up. She was not told you got bad manners. She was not told you being sassy. She was arrested because she broke the law. Because the law was on the side of segregation. And it was because of that, an unknown preacher just come out of Boston University, grew up in Atlanta, Martin Luther King helped with Ralph Abernathy and others lead a year bus boycott. And they said that it is better for us to walk in dignity. We're not gonna ride the bus. Those of us that don't have a car, we're gonna carpool or walk. It's better to walk in dignity than ride in shame. And it took a year. But they broke that bus company. They got the local laws changed. And the local laws later became state law, then federal law. It was always about the law and the lawmakers. It was not custom. A lot of young students today think they just had a bad attitude. No, they had the law. Now, you understand that. King's movement went 9 years, Freedom Riders, John Lewis and others beat up, interstate travel. And it got to the early 60s. The march, the boycott in Montgomery was 55 to 56. They didn't get a federal Civil Rights Act in 64. The reason I bring that up is a lot of young activists think that you're supposed to have one march and the world change. I hear young activists running around talking about we ain't getting nothing. You are not never getting nothing overnight. Movements are a process. It took the movement 9 years to go from 55 to 64. And with that momentum, with that momentum, they went, the next year got the 65 Voting Rights Act. And they had to renew it every year, every other year. Out of that movement, which was a Southern-based movement, all in the South, when they met in New Orleans, formed an organization, Dr. King named his organization the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Y'all with me? So it was a regional organization, even though Dr. King had national stature. They got to the 65 Voting Rights Act. Dr. King and them said, well, we'll never really be right unless we go north. In 66, they decided to bring that movement north. Now in the north, they didn't have the same state laws, so blacks could go where they wanted, but we couldn't get the job. anti-black power had to have a boycott to get blacks to even drive buses in Harlem in the 40s. So we went into this whole thing of connecting the South and the Northern movement. Right? And by the time we got into the mid-60s, we started seeing Dr. King looking around the North. He decided two places to go. He went to Ohio, to Cleveland, and he went to Chicago in Illinois. Chicago was having a fight around open housing and education. As they had that fight, they began talking about there were areas around Chicago that by law blacks couldn't get housing. They were able to reinforce certain edicts. Couldn't move in Cicero, Gage Park. A young seminary student who had been active in the South, worked with James Farming Corps, worked with his sorority, became a member of Dr. King's staff because he knew the ground in Chicago, knew the preachers. And Dr. King brought him on staff. And he was the one that brought the movement north. Dr. King's movement never went north until they went to Chicago and Cleveland. Cleveland is part of your state, is that right? I am in Ohio, right? This young student became the leader in Chicago of Dr. King's movement. Formed an economic party. There was a guy that had it in Atlanta, had not penetrated the North, named Bennett. He did so well, Dr. King made him the national director. Little did they know he'd be the one to carry on Dr. King's work. I'm connecting you from slavery to King coming to Ohio. That young student was named Jesse Jackson. Why I'm doing it is because I know the connections of where we come from. And you cannot be a strong tree if you don't know the roots. The strength of a tree is not its branches, it's its roots. If you're not rooted in anything, the seasons will take you out. Branches leave every season, but the roots stay.
Come on.
We're getting ready to go through a cold season right now. It's already cold in Cleveland, in this town. We change branches, change leaves, but the roots is what keeps the tree going. Yeah. And the reason why some of us has lasted through the test of time is we are rooted in something deeper. Jackson last all these years, 60 years of service. He was rooted in something. Yeah. There were other leaders that came and went. There were some popular. When I was in school, there were advocates that were not popular to me, but they were the ones everybody looked up to in Brooklyn where I grew up. But they weren't rooted in nothing. Jackson taught us Dr. King, who was rooted in a certain theology and philosophy. We got rooted in Jackson. So people come and go. I've seen in my career, every time we had a fight, if it was Trayvon all the way to George Floyd, you have a bunch of folks jump up, form little movements, and die in 2 years. You got folks sitting right here now, no folk that was in the George Floyd movement 2 years ago, power forever. We ain't going back. And you ain't heard from them since. Freedom of death. Now they got a job downtown. Because they're not rooted in nothing. You can't appoint folks to struggle. God anoints folks to struggle. some of our preachers. They're not rooted in the struggle. And if you read the Bible, it was all struggle. Oh. I go to some churches, and they tell me, Brother King, they tell me, well, you know, Reverend Al, we're glad to have you here, da, 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 da. Now, don't get too much into civil rights and politics. Just preach the word. I said, okay. Tell me what Bible y'all use here. He said, what do you mean? I said, because the Bible I read, the second book of the Bible was the Exodus of slaves from bondage, which was a civil rights liberation movement. Then you say don't talk politics. When David was king, Solomon was king, that's politics. Then you don't want women to equal, like you want no Joyce Beatty talk. Well, then you got to take Esther out of the Bible. Oh, come on. So I didn't get the Negro version. I mean, the but they're not rooted in this. I say all that to say, we are now in 2024. We're just like they used the Supreme Court in 1896. They're using the Supreme Court today that in the last year have taken away women's right to choose, taken away affirmative action from blacks and browns, and with the DEI have taken away voting rights. You are sitting in a time where they're reversing everything that was gained, and you got folk walking around educated more than their grandparents ever thought about, talking about you ain't got nothing to vote for. You run around talking about does Kamala wear too many pantsuits? And they trying to march you right back into the back of the bus. You got one candidate that hands up Andrew Jackson. You got another candidate that upholds Jesse Jackson. That's your choice. Whether you vote or not, and who you vote for does not define Kamala or Trump. It defines you. Because if you don't vote, you're telling us who you are. If you vote wrong, you're telling us who you are. If you become one that drops out, even though you go to a state university, public funds, it's telling us you are not educated. I don't care what degree you get. Because if people can say to you, let us decide your life, because we'll decide who the lawmakers are, and you're going to live under the law, then how educated could you be? What degree you got if you ain't smart enough to say, wait a minute, I'm going to decide who's going to decide on my life? You know, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and there's a lot of black nationalists that say we don't believe in the system. I don't know why you out there, Al, with all that breadbasket talk, registered vote, all that. We don't believe in the system. So about 2 months ago, I was telling my daughter, I ran into one of them in Harlem, 126th Street. And he and I about the same age. He was 86 and 07. And still had on the old revolutionary stuff. And had on his, you know, all that they dressed like when we was back in that. And I said, how you doing? He said, man, how you doing? I see you on television, got you a TV show. I said, yeah. I said, I see you still dressed like we're going to have the revolution. Yeah, man, but y'all with that system thing, I just ain't in that. They ain't done nothing for us, and da, da, da. I said, how you going to say that? When we have broke down laws, we changed what possibilities were. And it is a process. We ain't going to get everything overnight, but we live a better life, have better options than our grandparents had, our parents had, and that's because people fought. Nobody donated that to us. People died to give us the right. Blacks and whites. Goodman, Cheney, and Seward. 2 Jews and a black died. They killed them, mowed them down in Mississippi with their eyes open. Medgar was doing voter registration for blacks in Mississippi. Pulled up in his driveway one night, got out the car, man blew his brains out. With his children and wife inside to give us the right to vote. And here you are, in Columbus, Ohio. Nobody shooting you, nobody mowing you down, just too lazy and ungrateful. Somebody got to beg you to stand up for yourself. You sit there planning on having a family and don't want to protect child care. We, and this same guy I'm arguing with, said, well, all right, Al, we don't argue long enough. I got to go down here and check on my Social Security check. I said, I thought you don't believe in the system. You run around here talking to revolutionaries on Social Security. The challenge is, not only did the Supreme Court take away women's right to vote, students, not only did they take away affirmative action, not only did they dilute voting rights, they turned around the Congress giving you student loan debt forgiveness. That's right. You got folks in their 50s still paying for student loans. That the Biden-Harris administration got the Congress with Joyce Beatty to pardon student loans that the Supreme Court said is illegal. You are still living under laws that are unfair. So if anybody got a reason to vote, it's those of you that are being taken away the rights that you grew up with. I have one grandchild. He's 5 years old. He will grow up with less rights than I have. Why? Because you not voting. And because some rapper who got a pardon, and I ain't talking about rappers that rap right. I'm talking about rappers that got wrapped. And Trump gave them a pardon. I ain't talking about Kendrick Lamar and them that are rapping truth. I'm talking about those that will tell you to vote for Trump and can't tell you why. Why? You know, when I was going to school, there had a little girl, I won't call her name because y'all video and stuff. But she was always running around talking about, yeah, I didn't go to the prom with Al, I didn't go with Joe, I didn't go with Brent. And I said, what is she talking about? None of us asked her to go. I already had a prom date. Y'all run around here going with Trump, and Trump ain't asked y'all to go with him. Trump has laid out no agenda for y'all. He's not addressed none of your concerns. He ain't been to one of your colleges, one of your churches, one of your meetings. You trying to turn down somebody that never asked you in the first place. And you got a black woman running, she got to give you every policy. What you gonna do for us? Yeah. Donald Trump built his business, inherited means from his father, was cited by the Justice Department with discrimination. Built his business with buildings, construction, he's a builder. There is not one black or brown contract I know ever got a contract out of Donald Trump. In a city, 2/3 black and the brown. Ain't it funny? With all these indictments, you ain't see no blacks call the court. 34 counts he got convicted. They never accused him of working with black folks. I mean, you think he would be able to put one black businessman on the stand and said that, you know, I got a plumbing contract. You know, built buildings all over. Got a Trump building in Chicago. I said we'll meet with him, Hermine Hartman and some. You wouldn't give him a contract moving into Chicago. Why are you trying to go with somebody not trying to go with you? Call 6 African nations and Haiti shithole countries. That's his foreign policy for y'all. Well, you ain't got nothing to vote for. Oh, he got swagger. So did slave masters. So did segregationists. They had swagger. They had switches too. And they would beat your granddaddy with it. Don't let style change you from your own interests. So we're not here today, the sororities, National Action Network, Rainbow Push, tell you to vote for, but we are going to tell you what the options are. And we are going to tell you who stands for what. Yeah. Because you need to vote in your interest. It's not about do you like Trump or Kamala, it's do you like yourself. And you're in a state that helped turn that around. First black mayor of a major city was in Ohio.
Yes, sir. Cleveland.
Dr. King, Jesse Jackson came to Cleveland and campaigned in Cleveland and in Gary and elected the first black mayors in modern times, Richard Hatchett and Carl Stokes right here in Cleveland, Ohio. You're the children of that. You're the generation or two behind that. And you ought to embrace that history and embrace your present. And don't let nobody trick you into not embracing your history. Only people in America that don't celebrate their history are people that have been given a slave mentality. The first thing they had to do to slaves is cut them off from their history. Took their names, took the culture, because if you were connected to your history, you would know you were not born to be slaves. You knew you were born to govern. But if I can take your name and your history and you don't know who you are, then I can remake you as anything. So they tell young folks, don't go with that, that's old school. That's to cut off your history so they can enslave you. And you run around urinating on your roots. The only one that pisses on their roots is a dog. Dog go up to a tree and piss on his roots. Someone with common sense embraces their roots and grows up. So that's why we're here today to tell you to reconnect to the roots that made it possible for you to go to Ohio State. That made it possible for women to have the choice of their own body. Yeah, they don't like Kamala Harris, because if they don't want a woman to have the choice of her own body, they certainly don't want a woman in the White House choosing which way the country goes. And that's some of the brothers running around here. Talking to young black men. Talking all of that. Well, I don't know why we got to vote for a woman. Because a woman had you.
Come on.
Let me get this right. A woman was good enough to birth you. A woman went through the labor pains to bring you here. A woman nursed you when they couldn't afford milk. But now you don't know what a woman can do for you, and you think you educated. Can they balance the budget? When my father left at 10, my mother took a welfare check, food stamp, and scrubbed floors and balanced that. So I'm trying to tell you, let's deal with this with common sense and our own interests. And again, decide who you are and where you are in your circumstance. Don't go to social media and read up on Kamala or Trump. Look in the mirror and say, this is who I am, where I am. I may be in debt. Who is the best option for me? And if you look at that, you make the right choice. That's right. But the worst thing is to sit up there and let everybody decide for you. Because I'm going to tell you something that you may not know. You may think it's a rumor. They are going to have an election, whether you vote or not. And the winner of the election is going to make the laws that you're going to live under, whether you like them or not. So you ought to be part of the deciding, Because you will be part of the decided. There ain't gonna be no choice. And if the wrong folk get in and cut the education budget and cut student debt even more, you will be sitting outside talking about the way we were and the way it used to be. And you help bring that in. Well, Rev, I'm just not in it. I'm not voting for Trump, but I'm not voting. Then you're voting for people that will take everything from you because they voted and you did. And that's why we came to Columbus today.
All right. Thank you.
Because Columbus and Ohio, and this ain't the first time, you know, I told them that the ministers leaders thing this morning. I come to Columbus when they kill Andre, please. I came and helped pay for the funeral and preached. So I don't just come here and tell you to vote for. And if some of y'all have a problem now, y'all be calling us. And we'll come. So we coming now saying vote, but vote your interest. Now let me give you a little bio on Brother Trump. I saw him on TV this morning. I didn't want to go this morning. He was supposed to be making a speech and he ran out of words. They say that he stopped playing records. Stopped playing music. Y'all saw it on the news. And he can't dance. He just kind of. When I was growing up, they did have a robot, but he couldn't do that. That's don't make him president. And he made a speech the other day. He said, y'all didn't vote in January. Ain't no election in January. Imagine if Biden thought the election was in January and was up doing the robot thing. They've been all over everywhere. Trump ain't got it no more.
No, he don't.
But let me tell you one piece of this issue. In 1990, there was a vicious, despicable assault in Central Park in New York. A white young lady was savagely beaten and raped. The police went into the park and grabbed 5 young black and brown teenagers and brought them to the precinct and forced them to say they did it, told them if you just sign these statements, you go home. Signed the statements, they indicted those boys, set them for trial. One of their mothers called me. By then I had developed some notoriety in New York fighting injustices. And they said, this woman said to me, my son is one of the 5 you might have read in the paper. I said, yeah, I saw it. That's vicious. And I don't know if I need to get involved. She said, Reverend, I'm telling you, my son didn't do it. I said, yeah, but they talking about Wilden and all of this. She says, I know my son. And he didn't do it. And I thought about how I was raised by a single mom on welfare. And she fought for me. And because of this woman, I said, I'm gonna go out here and see what I can do to scare this woman. And me and a few other activists joined this woman. We'll go to court. They called us everything but a child of God. Didn't constitute them. But we fought for them boys. They convicted them, sent them to jail. Donald Trump, who was a businessman in New York, I told you he'd been found guilty of discrimination. Every race case in New York, they kill a boy, black guy, for being in Howard Beach section of Queens, for being in the neighborhood. Kill him. Donald Trump didn't open his mouth. Killed another young man 2 years later in a place called Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn. Blacks were not allowed. Killed him. Shot him through the heart. Yusef Hawkins. Donald Trump didn't open his mouth. All the way through other racial atrocities. But this one case, he not only opened his mouth, he paid an ad and put in the newspaper calling for them to bring back the death penalty to kill those 5 young men. $85,000 ad. We kept marching. They demonized us. We were supporting criminals. We were supporting wild. Many years later, 13 years later, someone did 7 years, one did 13 years.
Jesus.
There was a boy in the cell that had been arrested and shot, talking to his cellmate. And he said to his cellmate, you remember years ago them Central Park 5 boys? Cellmate said, yeah, I remember that. He said, you know them guys didn't do that. He said, they didn't. He said, no, I did that. The cellmate, not that he was some marvelous, he trying to cut a deal to get himself out of jail. He went and told on his cellar and said, you know, he told me he did that. They had the dress from the girl that had been raped, because there was no DNA stuff back when it happened, but they still had the dress in evidence. And they matched the cellmate's DNA with the dress and exonerated those guys.
My God.
That's the only way. That's the only way they got out of jail or got cleared. Donald Trump still in the paper said, no, don't let him go. Don't give him a diamond cellar. But those young men came out, and somehow God guided them and took them from disgrace to amazing grace. And decided to live their life as an example of truth crushed the earth shall rise again. And they are, two of them are with me here today to tell you their story about Donald Trump. One of them became one of our leading actors in New York City. The other was just elected to the New York City Council as a I want you to hear from Brother Kari Weiss and Councilman Yusef Salam.